Hey guys, seeing you guys again this week. Really hoping we can get these buses up and going soon. I know we've all been in prayer. Ryan's trying to think of plans of how to get back to seeing you all and just pray that we can get back together. This week I have a message on obedience or obeying. I think that it's something that we sometimes forget, or we just use one verse and we don't give it enough justice. One verse I believe that you guys all know is Ephesians 6:1-2. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and thy mother, which is the first commandment with promise. You know, one thing about being obedient, it shows that we care. You know, if we want to show our parents that we care, we're obedient. And I think one of the reasons why God makes sure to put this verse in there saying, children, obey your parents, is we physically see our parents. We physically see leadership. And if we cannot obey our parents, if we cannot obey leadership that we can physically see, how are we going to obey God and His Word? Somebody that we can't see. All we have is God's Word. How are we going to obey that? And so one thing that I got out of being obedient is in 1 Samuel 15:22, it says this. It says, and Samuel saith, has the Lord as great delight in burnt offering and sacrifice as in obeying his voice of the Lord. Behold, to obey is better than the sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of the ram. See, a lot of times we try to do things that look good. We try to do things that are pleasing. You know, you could do things where you're helping others. You can do things where you try to do things that are outwardly to show you. But God cares more about obedience. See, back then they used to offer sacrifices, and sometimes people would get showy with sacrifices, and they would say, well, I did this, or I sacrificed that. And God really doesn't care about the sacrifice. He cares about the obedience. And one reason why He cares about obedience is faith is shown through obedience. In Genesis chapter 22, we see a story of how how obedience through God is shown through the faith of Abraham. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, here I am. And he said, take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee. So God's telling Abraham, I want you to go sacrifice your son. Abraham has to be faithful. He decides to be faithful. And we read down a little bit more and we see this. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took two of his young men with him and Isaac, his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. So right now we see obedience. We see that he got his son. He got the stuff for the offering. He's on the road and going to the mountain, and he's doing what God told him to do. But yet he's being asked to do something that's great for him, which would be offering up his son. But he's still being obedient. And then we go a little bit more, and it says this. Then on the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, abide ye here with the asses, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again. You know, I find it funny. They were going to do a sacrifice and they called it worship. You know, obedience is a type of worship, and God desires us to be obedient. And we go down just a little bit more, and it says here, and Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and the knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spoke unto Abraham the father and said, my father. And he said, here I am, son. And he said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb of the burnt offering? Still, being obedient, we're going further down the process. It doesn't look good for Isaac. It looks like Abraham's going to have to sacrifice his only son. And we go down just a little bit more, and he's questioning, where's this lamb? That's what the normal sacrifice is. And we see here, he says, and Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for the burnt offering. So they went both together. So Abraham still has faith. It doesn't look good. Situation doesn't look good. I guarantee Abraham is still praying this whole way. He doesn't really want to give up his son. He loves his son. But he's going to be obedient to God. And we go a little bit further, and it says this, and they came to a place which God had told him of, and Abraham built the altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hands and took the knife to slay his son. He's about ready to kill his son. He has him tied down. He's going to kill his son like God wanted him to. Still being obedient. And I'm sure right now he is really sweating it. He's really thinking, Lord, I want to love you. I want to be obedient. This is hard. I'm going to follow you, Lord. But man, he's right at that point. He's at that decision, which a lot of you guys will get at some point. If I'm going to be faithful to the Lord, I'm going to have to go through some hard times. And we see how God responds right here. And it says, and then an angel of the Lord called unto him out of the heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. And he said, lay not a hand upon the lad, neither do thy anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, for me. So God sees, he's up to that point, he's about ready to end his son's life because God wanted him to, give him up as a sacrifice, and God sends an angel and says, I see what you're doing, I respect that, I see that you love me, I'll take care of this for you. And here we go again. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son. So God provided a sacrifice. But up to that point, Abraham was faithful. He was obedient. He was going to follow through even in the tough times. Guys, there's going to be tough times in your family. There's going to be tough times in your life. And you're just going to have to you're going to have to decide, am I going to follow this book? Am I going to follow God and trust that he'll provide in those hard times? And you know what? A lot of you have parents that are probably going through hard times right now. Pray, pray, pray. God hears your prayers. He cares about you. And you know what? You can look back a year, 2 years, 3 years, and be like, wow, God heard my prayers. He took care of this issue. I've had times where, I don't get how things are going to get paid. I don't get how we're going to move from Wisconsin to Arkansas, but God takes care of everything if we're faithful and we obey his word. I'm not promising you that you'll be rich. I'm not promising you everything's going to be great, but I am promising you this. I'm promising you if you're obedient to God's word, if you stick to what God says, he will take care of you and he will provide a way. So guys, I just thank you for this time. I hope this message reaches you well, and I continue to pray for you guys, and just pray for our church, pray for our buses, pray for your friends that come to church, Lord, because I don't know what's going on anymore out there. I haven't seen a lot of you, but I care about you. God cares about you, and I know that there's trials. With that, good week.